Hello, my name is Tolg, and I exist, therefore I think too much. I am generally plagued by public opinion. um, and I learned over the years from a therapist who goes to therapy and having been dragged to, Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, as a child, that emotions are tools. Emotions are felt by the individual as a tool meant to help you understand your reality and perceive it, what's going on and what needs to be done because of what is going on. But expressing emotions is also a tool, meant to help you communicate better, like a baby cries because it needs something. Sure, feels absolute abject horror because these needs are not met and it cannot provide for itself. So, having said all of this, it ages with the individual and what the needs are perceived to be and the requisition of those needs. My chemicals, however, are not... And I'm starting to doubt they were ever normal, quote unquote. So every now and again, I'll put myself in a position where I know I will deteriorate, so to speak. And I allow that deterioration to happen because that is the only time I am granted what I go through. And the body, for some unknown reason, while my brain is logical, my body seems to not be. And I've talked about this with others, so I know like this is not abnormal. That, especially going through so many things growing up, you get to a point where emotions lose their whimsy almost. Like, yeah, you can lose your own whimsy, but emotions, the point of them loses reason. But my body still craves crying. I just don't see the reason to do it, and it would disrupt things, so sometimes I'll seek out media to help me cry. My friend does romantic comedies, I think, but I've been crying at Gilmore Girls recently. And things like that. It's just, having said all of this, I don't think I'll be reading my normal today. I don't have the easiest time recovering, and I put myself in a position of power assuming that I have brought this emotional upheaval up because I'm desperate to have that power over myself, rather than to say that I've been influenced by external resources or sources at all, to be pushed to a breaking point. I'd hate to give them that power. That is actually, let's see if I can... This tattoo here is la la la. Oh man, that hurt so much. It's a snake wrapped around my ankle. It's biting into me because I wanted to believe at the end of the day that it was my fault. Everything was my fault. It's a hell of a lot easier to blame myself for what went wrong in my life than it is to give that power over to someone else. I would like to walk away thinking that I chose the familiar devil out of two, rather than to admit that I didn't know the outcome and I chose what I thought was safer. But in all of this, I made the choice, so I could have suffered one hell. I chose a different, and now I complain about it. Yeah, all of this to say that I experienced emotions more than I'd like to. And I'm put out, and it's hard for me to recover from having experienced emotions. I don't know the normal way about this, because I think the normal way is to drag these emotions out, to give them a stage of their own, and to feel them perpetually for maybe like a week or a month when people feel this level, but it happens too frequently for me to want to acknowledge it. And then in not acknowledging it, I feel like I'm being dubious, not doing enough in one way or another. Somehow, it's not that I'm being dishonest, but that my portrayal of my person feels like it's not meeting other people's expectations. And in that, I live with just my significant other. I would like it to be that I am simply working on my person, and especially my person in relation to the relationship I uphold, but especially with these videos that I am making, it's why I've gone for years. I'm 32 years old. It's why I've gone for years not putting anything out on the internet, really. Because I didn't want to be known. Have a difficult time managing myself, and then managing myself in relation to where it concerns others. So therein, I'm not doing the normally scheduled reading of the books because I don't think normalcy feels appropriate. It may be appropriate, but it doesn't feel like it is. So I figured I would just read from a different book. Today. There's the pause. Thank you, my brain. There was a rant that I was going on prior to this, however, and it was in regards to what people use, the cards they have, to be able to secure a sense of not only belonging, but safety. Which led into, I am more than I experience things, I observe things. And I learn by observation, which I think is just normal. So a lot of the things that I learned did not happen because I directly experienced it. Having said that, I have said it in other videos that the place in which I live doesn't have a whole hell of a lot for people to go out and do unless they have money to spend. And then at that, the majority of the culture here is foodie. So it's, where do you want to eat? What do you want to drink? And again, to re-quote the quote from someone else, it's not what you do here. It's not where you go here. It's who you know here. Most people in this town are 3 degrees away from each other. They know someone who knows the individual you're talking about. And the gossip keeps everybody alive. It's their main source of nutrition. So my significant other, while having not been directly involved, I found out years later, after the year I was with a different significant, an ex of mine now, what they were actually involved in, what they were doing. I didn't know during. And that's the point that in a rant I felt I would like to stress to the general public. I get called dangerous every now and again, and in middle school I started carrying a knife around with me. This will be relevant, sort of, because of, general public and how they treat a young girl. And so I get that I come across in a menacing way, but it's because I don't want to be approached. I don't want to be known. And I don't want to be known in the way that you desperately want to know me normally. If you're just approaching me randomly on the street, I don't trust the reason with which you're approaching me. I'll give you ground to test it, but so I totally respect that I'm coming across in a way that's not, girl next door, easy to deal with, and that's purposefully done, and it's hopefully done. The rant is that you won't know you are involved in something dangerous until it is too late, or unless you are the person that is doing the dangerous thing. Most people exist as a character defense for the people doing the dangerous things, which then is a different sort of an abusive relationship. Because you either have to acknowledge the abuse that's happening to others and live with that and develop your person around it, or you are forced to ignore it to keep yourself safe, which puts you in a position of needing to make a choice, which is absurd. No one should be put into this position of choosing your life over someone else's life. That's torture. That's psychological torture. So if you know an abusive person, just because you're not directly getting abused does not mean that you are not suffering abuse from that person. It's just a different flavor. And most people take up an ego hit. It's not happening to me. And therein, I'm better for it. I'm different for it. I'm favored for it. There are different levels of how you address someone who is generally abusive. For whether you are directly suffering it or indirectly. But someone who is abusive is corrosive no matter what. Whether you befriend them, whether you're their hype man, whether you're their business partner, or you benefit off of them so that they can literally benefit off of you by character defense. And I read something recently in one of these philosophical thingies, recently by like the last time I made a video, and it was if you are taking into account morality, you do have to take into consideration that the judgment on someone else's moral status is also needing to comply with morality. Because that judgment is a cause and a reaction to something. And if you are producing that judgment with lack of consideration of subjectivity, are you actually being as moral as you have imposed yourself to be? Or are you blaming another source so that the blame does not come back to you? And when you take into consideration an abusive relationship, and I don't mean abusive as blatant abuse, but just in dangerous situations, abuse can be, you saw this, no you didn't. You didn't have a choice in that matter. But now you're an accomplice. That's abusive as fuck. You were not currently participating and now you are. So most people don't know something is dangerous until it's too late. And by the time it's too late, you need to make a decision of how you're going to live the rest of your life. Most people, as one would, choose to keep themselves safe, which promotes this seedy nature of reality. And in this seedy nature, you then justify your actions. You take pride in the fuck shit you participate in because it's not happening against your will and it's not happening to you. You create a group, which is a bastardization of a community that you end up defending. Because at the very least, it's not happening to you. There's a question that keeps floating around. How did we let things get like this? Why is no one reacting? Everybody's keeping themselves safe, as they've always done. If they knew it was happening, they could not afford to speak on it. If they didn't know it was happening, they kept themselves safe by promising they would never know. Now that it's become blatantly apparent that it was happening, most people would prefer to bury their heads in the sand. Because then it becomes a question, how much did you know? How much did you comply with? Did you let this continue? Are you at fault? Just being the character defense, does that mean that you support this morally? When in reality, the majority of the character defenders were being abused into the situation. Their morals were taken away from them. I have a tendency to say that I'm in a position where I cannot afford shame. And I've been in that position for fucking years, being the least of us. Because to afford shame is to be afforded a certain type of privilege where you're recognized societally. And it is very much akin to that. If you are being forced to defend someone and their actions on the premise of keeping yourself safe, you cannot afford shame. You cannot afford morality. All you can do is try to take your psychology out of it. Which then doubles up on, do the drugs so you don't pay attention. So you don't have to pay attention. Because I think, generally, and this is the romantic in me, I'm pretty sure people don't like that shit. I'm pretty sure the normal general person doesn't want to participate in evils. It takes a specific type of psychology to want that. Everyone else is complying and complicit because everybody lives out of fear. Which then, philosophically, why be alive? Sure, everybody will blame you for being complicit because, Nuremberg trials saying that you were just following orders is no good. But when it comes down to an individual and making the choice, do I stay alive or do I not? What's the point of living out in fear? Are you living or are you surviving? If you were forced into an abusive relationship, that's one thing, because it's innate in us to try to stay alive. But myself, speaking purely for myself, after that abusive relationship, you do have to make the decision, do you want to stay alive? And then if you do make the decision, yeah, you do want to stay alive, then you have to work out what is survival, what is living. And for the length of time you've been abused will determine if you know how to live or not. So if you've been abused since you were a child, what's life worth? If all you've known is defending other people's abusive behavior, what's life worth to you? People ask, how can this happen? Why is no one doing anything? Maybe you should ask, what is life worth to them? Maybe they should be asking themselves, what is life worth? Okay, next video will be me reading.